starting the process of moving on?
I'm Irene Favel. I'm 75. I went to residential school in Muskogee in 1941 to 1949, and I had a very, very rough life. I was mistreated in every way. As a young girl, she was 7-year-old. She was pregnant, and what they did, she had her baby. They took the baby, wrapped it up in a nice pink outfit, took it downstairs. I was in the kitchen with the nun who were cooking supper. They took the baby into the, where they make a fire and all that to heat up the school furnace room. They threw that little baby in there and burnt it alive. All you could hear was, that was it. And you could smell the flesh cooking. It's a big mistake when people say we were treated good. No way. There's a lot of things that happen in those boarding.
Okay, welcome to Truth or Talk. I'm Virstyne Henry.
And I'm April Bowden.
For this segment of the show, we're bringing back our friend and frequent guest, Sara Sotomayor. We did a full-length interview with Sara a few months ago where she discussed her experience after receiving the HPV vaccine Gardasil, and subsequently talked about her healing process, which you can read about in her blog, Sara's Healing Journey, at sarashealingjourney.wordpress.com. And later in the show, we'll be talking to Kevin Annett, who's been exposing the truth about the Canadian Holocaust. And coincidentally, as we were scheduling Kevin to be on the show, we found out that Sara had started researching him and his work. So we decided to bring her back so she can share her experience on the matter. So please welcome to the show, Sara Sotomayor. Hello, Sara.
Hey, Hi, guys. Good to have you back.
Yeah, it's great. How are you guys?
Good.
We're doing good. And how's the blog? Do you have any more information on your blog?
No, not yet, but I'm almost finished writing the second entry, which will be good. It's been a rough couple of months, so hopefully I'll be able to get out the post sooner.
Oh, okay. So how are you feeling?
I'm actually doing pretty good. I had treatment a couple of days ago, and it went really well, and so everything's looking really good.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Good.
That's really good to know.
Yeah, that's good to know. We're always pleased to hear that you're doing well. So, yeah. So, what have you been doing? Can you share with us some of the? We always like to know what you're doing, because you always have these great ideas for natural healing. Virstyne and I are taking notes.
Wait, let me get my notebook, because Sara always comes up with stuff that I'm just like, dang, Sara, let me get my pen and pencil.
So what kind of stuff have you been doing lately that's been kind of helping you out?
Well, I've been doing 2 new herbs. One of them is an herbal tincture, and it's called Hidden Tiger Bone, and it's a tincture, and it has more than one herb in it, and what it does is it helps the liver, kidneys, spleen, and stomach, and it really helps the joints and the muscles, and it helps your muscles to be more flexible, not as tight, and it really helps your liver to work better and cool off, because the liver doesn't like to be hot, which is a traditional Chinese medicine term, and so you can think of it as inflammation or swelling, so it helps to cool it down. And I got a liver tonic, which is all yin, which means healing, and it helps to cool the liver down even further. And there are a few herbs in there that help the phase 2 process of the liver, and the phase 2 process deals with toxins that have been activated, and you want the phase 2 process to go really quickly so you can get it out. And when it doesn't go well at all, you can reabsorb the toxins. So it helps with that. And then there's an herb in there that if you've had part of your liver taken out, it will help you to rebuild it. So, really strong herbs. And doing things to rebuild my connective tissue, which the lime will eat away at, and rebuilding my magnesium levels and mineral levels, and that's been really helpful. And the only thing that's really catching up is I'm dealing with getting rid of some lead and some of the recombinant DNA. And that's the only thing that really showed up, which is really good because I've always had like blockages, energetic blockages on certain organs or systems, and nothing showed up. And that was really good because I've never been this clear since she saw me the first time 3 years ago.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah, that is good. That's awesome.
So it's got to catch up somehow on the physical level since I'm doing so well on every other level, which you'll find the levels in homeopathy. You've got the energetic level, the mental level, the spiritual level, and the I think soul level. And other people do like different levels, like the emotional level and things like that. But everything's checking out really good.
Great.
Oh, wow, that's great. It's really
That's
so now
good
it's
news.
about rebuilding.
That's good news. And so when you say the yin and the yang, you say yin is healing, and yang does that mean grounding? What is that kind of?
Yang is the male aspect, and yin is the female. So yang is more of like doing things active, so that sort of thing, and then yin is more resting, rebuilding, rejuvenation.
Oh, okay.
So that's good. And the liver in Chinese medicine is a yin organ. And so when you have yin tonics, it's really helpful to the liver or any other yin organ in the body.
Wow, that's good to know. I'm always like listening to you because, as you know, I'm always trying to try things out with my own son, Aiden, and his recovery as well from vaccine damage. So your information is always really helpful.
Yeah.
So getting back to what we talked about, Kevin Annett, who we're going to have on the show after we speak to Sara, so what have you learned about this? When did you start learning about this, Sara? When did you start learning about his work?
I learned about this a little bit about it a couple of months ago, and then I started to research it more in, I think, around September. And I heard about it through one of Santos Bonacci's astrotheology videos. And the first thing that I heard, he said he talked about that Big Pharma was involved and the Vatican was involved. So I'm like, oh wow, what is going on?
Yeah.
And so it's a lawsuit that Kevin Annett has filed on behalf of the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State, and Jason Bowman, the Association of Citizen Prosecutors, in a federal court against the Church and Crown. And this is dealing with the Indian Holocaust that's gone on in Canada. And they're going to be dealing with Canada first, but this is going to end up being a class action lawsuit. But the things that they've done to these children and to these people is incredibly horrific. They went in schools of the Indian boarding schools, and these children were at like 5-6 years old, and when they would first enter the school, they as a matter of policy, they would be gang raped. There was child trafficking involved, and in Canada there were 2 Bilderberg members who were involved in the child trafficking. And there are many more elites involved in this. And the children and their family were sterilized if they would not convert to Christianity. They were used as test subjects for drugs and medical experimentation. And there have been modern pharmaceutical companies that have been involved. And the 2 that have been involved have been Eli Lilly and GlaxoSmithKline. So big surprise there. And there have been...
I know, right?
Yeah. There have been disappearances of children. Over 15,000 children have been killed. They've been starved. They've found child remains and school clothing on these sites, from the schools to the churches, and they've been doing forensic analysis on those. But one of the ones that I found most interesting was that there were eyewitnesses in October 1964 in British Columbia, and the Queen and Prince Philip were in the company of 10 native children, and these children were never seen again. And they have a lot to do with this stuff, but it definitely deals with the Pope and the crown.
Yeah, we're wanting to ask him about all that stuff too, because I've researched similar things, and he's obviously the expert on that and knows that stuff. But yeah, it's creepy now, and then happening all over the world too. I mean, we had a similar sort of history in the United States with regards to the Native Americans and how they have been treated, and basically the missionaries who came through the United States and set up missions all over were basically doing the same thing. I mean, they were just forcing the Native people to believe to sort of remove themselves from their culture and, become believers in Christianity or, Catholicism, whatever they were trying to preach. And which is just weird in and of itself, but then it kind of gets into this sort of like, I don't know, cult, like ritualistic kind of thing. It just, I mean, I'm not one to really know a lot about that kind of stuff, but it just, I can't help but to sort of feel that there's something going on with that. Don't you guys?
There's like a bigger agenda of evil, I guess you would say, right?
Well, yeah, like Satanism or something, because I don't know enough about it, but I mean, when you think about things like Bohemian Grove, and then they go and they do all these weird, like, rituals, and I don't even know what they're doing. They're, like, praying to an owl or something. Like, it's really bizarre, and you're going, these are people that are running the country, and they're just doing all these...
And we're giving their energy to them and their power and our trust,
Yeah, and they're very strange, and they don't seem to like women, children, or people of color. But they like other.
I've been dying to get that question asked.
Yeah,
answered. I mean, I have some idea about why that is. What I think?
Yeah, why do you think that is?
I just think like people, usually indigenous people, and this is the thing I've thought about because it's not only in Canada, the U.S. I mean, all over the world. Even in Taiwan, there were Aborigines that were killed. It's the same stuff just going on all over. But okay, so I think though that people that are indigenous, they have a special connection with the earth. They have a special connection with each other. They have a certain warmness that these people that seem to be doing it to them they don't have.
Right.
Because they like you take example the Native Americans, right, in America. The Pilgrims are running from their government. They were being tortured and persecuted, and then they come here and then they do the same thing to the Native Americans. And it's weird. The thing I think about the cycle is it seems like the people that were traumatizing and their relatives killed, it's as if they lose something, and then they turn around and they do the same thing to somebody else. Like spiritually, soulfully, something has happened to them. So I think a lot of people of color, they and I'm not saying, I mean, white people have this too. I'm not saying that white people don't, but I think the small, as far as we know, the small group of people that are perpetrating these crimes are whites. A small group, and they go into these to the countries. Either they maybe they want resources. I'm sure too. Maybe it has different reasons as to why they particularly are targeting people of color. But a lot of the places too that they're targeting that have people of color, they have tremendous resources. Whether it's metals or types of foods or gold or something, oil. So that, and then I also think that a lot of people they have faith. They're very spiritual. And I think if you're somebody that's very spiritual and you have faith and you're in unison with nature, you're a threat to somebody who isn't.
Do you think? I mean, because when you're describing that, you're almost saying. I almost feel like that has to do with also why we see so many children sacrificed.
Yeah.
And that's just of all races, but we see this like sort of ritualistic child sacrifice going on. As we talked to Sarah about, with the Gardasil vaccine, it almost feels like that's sort of a part of that.
Ritualistic.
It does, right? Because it's almost like we're going to take these young women, I mean, or
who
just
might
coming
virgins.
Right, or just coming into puberty, or just coming into that, you know, their child-rearing ages, and we're going to try and, I don't know, sacrifice them, and what we've seen in, I mean, the Penn State incident, or even, you know, we don't know yet if that was, I mean, I feel pretty confident that was child trafficking going on. Yeah. Even though, because it just has all the markers of it. I mean, we had in the early 90s or the late 80s, it was the Franklin cover-up where the kids were going into Boys Town. Now, we know that for sure because that was uncovered by Senator John DeCamp. He went in and found that the Franklin credit union was sort of funneling money that they were taking from this child trafficking ring that they were running out of the Boys Town orphanage. So the kids, they had these boys who were orphans, and they were using them basically as prostituting them out for these men who were, you know, many of them politicians, you know, or well-respected men in the corporate world, you know, very wealthy, and they were coming in and buying these boys. Now, this is a fact. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This just really happened. Yeah. And so when you see something like the Penn State thing, I immediately would go, oh, that looks like the Franklin cover-up, because you had this guy Sandusky, who we know was a pedophile. We know he was doing those things. That's already been exposed. But why did he get away with it for so long? Why was he able to run, you know, a child who's basically taking disenfranchised youth, and that was his sort of, quote, nonprofit organization that he was running. He was taking these children and bringing them into this and then supposedly helping them. But the thing was is that, what was it like in 2006? He was already under investigation, and then the Child Protective Services and the Attorney General both dropped the lawsuit suddenly, saying they didn't have enough evidence, even though they had something like 13 witnesses. So and they had they had victims coming forward, and they had people who had witnessed it, seeing personal accounts of what was going on, and yet they said they dropped it suddenly. And then the Attorney General, after the case was dropped, his brother committed suicide, quote, quote, or was suicided by a river, and they just found him. They said he had bipolar disorder, so he was depressed.
I'm choosing option B, suicided.
And then a year or so later, the Attorney General himself went missing, never to be seen or heard from again. He goes off, and in his car, he called his girlfriend and said he was going shopping, and then she said okay, because it was after work or whatever's normal practice for him, and all of a sudden just gone. They find his car. It's been ransacked. It's clearly been, you know, things have been taken out of his car. Files, documents, things that he had regarding the case are, of course, missing. So,
does it end? Like, it's just, the level is just
right,
a thing.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, how do they do that? You know what I mean?
The whole thing that people see this going on and they do nothing. People are scared to come out and speak about it, you know?
Right.
And it's easier. I know it's easier said than done. Like, I mean, simplistically looking at it, it's because people don't speak up, because other people are, you know, it's a small amount of people that are doing this, you know?
Right. But I think that a lot of people are afraid, obviously, because you have, you know, these people that are very powerful and very high up, and then when you see them at the Bohemian Grove and things like that, and you see the kind of things that they do, and was it they said that Tony Blair was like into witchcraft or something? I mean,
on that note, I'm curious about the people, because it's like a small amount of people, either a leader or very few people. Like, you know, maybe I can even count the number of people maybe on two hands that decide to do something like this. It's very, very small, right? But then you have these people decide to manipulate people into hurting other people. For instance, the Nazis, right? If you Hitler, and then he had some other people working with him, Hitler and his crew, his posse, let's just say, and then they manipulated the Nazis into killing, 11 million people in Germany, right? 6 million Jews, 5 million other, including gypsies, handicapped people, black people, gay people, mentally, disabled people, right? Maybe more if I'm leaving out Polish people. I know I'm leaving some other people out. I apologize. But it's just that, like, I was looking at this. I'm watching this documentary now about a genocide, right, in general. And they're talking about genocides that have happened all over the world. And this guy's interviewing a Hutu person that murdered Tutsi. When the genocide happened in Rwanda, it was the Hutus that murdered the Tutsis. And he was just saying that he couldn't explain it. He was saying it was like a cloud that came into people's hearts, and then he said everything became dark, and it was like, he said it was like being in a fog, like something came over them and they just couldn't control it,
Hitler also had the blessing of the Pope to go for the Jews, so, I mean,
oh, that's terrible.
It's like everywhere. And I think also to add to why they're going after these indigenous people is because these people have elders who are the wisdom keepers of their knowledge, and who's to know how far that knowledge goes back, and if they want to destroy it.
Exactly. Well, that's why they their language and their their language and their arts, their knowledge, definitely, because all that is through their language and stuff,
It's sort of like a wide a wide-scoped rape. It's like you're trying to take away the person's energy, you're trying to take away their power, you're trying to take away their knowledge, and they have strength and power from their heritage, understanding their own wisdom or the wisdom of their people. And so, I guess maybe stripping them of that, and then you get them weak and kind of can take advantage of them.
Because if people realize their power, that's their undoing.
Ugh.
If we look at, all the things that we're finding out about ourselves as humans, slowly. Like I'm always saying, who the fuck are we?
Yeah.
Certain things about us, and now I think about too, like all of the pollution that's been, put on us, and everything in the environment, and the chemicals that we eat, and the chemtrails and stuff. They're like, we should be dead.
Right.
Right, and then the attack on our spirit, our soul, by, things that have happened in society, using fear against us, keeping us ignorant. I feel like something's being deliberately done to keep us in the state. I don't think it was a system that, I used to think it was a system that just went out of control.
Right.
Because people were just careless, or maybe some people were greedy and just weren't thoughtful about their actions. But now I'm getting to the point where the more I find out, the more I research, I feel like that things have been as intentionally done to us as a human race. We have certain conditions to keep us in a divide and conquer mode. As far as sex, as far as race, as far as nationality, religion, all this stuff that I think for the most people we know deep down is wrong, to hate each other or fight over these little isms that we have. But I'm ranting. I'm sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that's correct, because we are basically one race. This is the human race, but everybody's different too. So you're saying we have all these isms that make us different, but based on culture or background, but even within our own race, we're still different. Nobody's quite the same.
Yeah, definitely.
And so they're just trying to, I don't know, make us weaken us, trying to break our will,
Yeah, definitely. So I feel like we're being attacked physically and emotionally and spiritually on that level too.
No.
I feel like, I would like to hear, I've read some books on race, and how, even though we look different, working with children, children know that we look different, but they don't attach any meaning to it. They just know that you look different. They know that your skin is lighter or darker, your hair is different, your eyes are different. But they don't really make that. Yeah. Or curious sometimes, maybe, especially if they've grown up in an environment where maybe they haven't seen somebody that looks drastically different than them, for the most part they will be maybe curious, maybe a little frightened. Some of them, that's more rare as I've encountered, but for the most part they don't make it mean that I'm better than you or you're better than me, or
Right.
they don't make it mean that.
No, it's just sort of a way to identify the person. It gives them sort of, that's the, because my oldest son Avery, he would call people, he would sort of identify people that way. Sometimes he'd go, oh yeah, I was playing with those kids, and I'd say, oh, what's that kid's name? He says, oh, I don't know. You mean the kid with the brown skin? He was just sort of, it was just sort of a way
Exactly.
It didn't mean anything to him other than I can tell the difference between you and you because you look different than this person.
Yeah.
And to this day, even though he knows the names of his grandparents, but when he was little, he didn't know the names of his grandparents. So he had the white grandparents and the brown grandparents. And people used to think, wait, they'd hear him say that, and they go, what is he talking about? He meant the color of their hair. Because so on my husband's side, their hair is white, and my parents have brown hair. And so he's saying the brown and the white. And so he would tell people this when he was in like preschool and he was 4 or 5 years old. He didn't know their names; they were just grandma, grandpa. But it was the only way he could tell. He could explain to you which ones he was talking about. And so,
that's awesome.
yeah, and so that's the way he did it. And people would look at me like, well, what? That's so unpolitically correct. And I'm going, no, he's talking about the hair color. It's not, it's nothing to do with the race. So it's just kind of how, and even to this day, he calls them that just because he got into the habit of it. And even though he knows their names now, but it's just funny. It's just very innocent. He was just describing what they look like. So,
do you think? What do you guys think about the police state that's happening in America? Because I think there are a lot of people, they look at genocide too, and they read about it or they see it like, oh, that will never happen in this day and time, although it is happening as we speak in different parts of the world, or they say, oh, that will never happen in America.
Well, I hear people about the TSA. They're like, well, I'm like, well, they're basically molesting children. And people are like, oh, well, their parents are standing right beside them. And I'm like, so that makes it okay that they're molesting them?
It makes it worse.
Yeah. It does make it worse because the parents are consenting to it.
Yeah. Oh, well, their parents are right there, so, like,
it's totally fine.
I mean, yeah, but then you hear about the FEMA camps and that they're in operation, and you look at the TSA and what they're doing, and how does that really make, people are suspending belief again on this one. How does that really make you safe from a terrorist? And humiliating you. There are people that have been molested. It was so sad. I saw this lady in her maybe late 40s, and she was an incest survivor, and she was talking about they just basically molested her all over again, and her having to relive that. And I was just made me so angry, and stuff like that. Does that make you feel, really, that makes you feel safe? It doesn't make any sense, but people are just, again, there's some people that are coming out and speaking out about it, but I don't know. Until we get enough people awake or aware of the problem, I actually got into a Facebook fight with this dude over it. This is a while ago after I've given up Facebook fights, but because he was sticking up for the TSA basically.
Gross. That's disgusting. I need to stick up for the TSA.
And then he would say, well, if you don't like it, don't fly. I was like, fuck you.
Yeah.
No, we should have the right to, if we have the money to pay for a flight, we should have the right to go on an airplane and not be harassed.
Irradiated,
Irradiated, yeah, exactly. But see, that's where it goes back to the whole fear thing. So essentially what we were talking about, what Sara was describing at the beginning when we were talking about the residential schools, it's kind of happening on a larger scale, but they're a little more subtle about it. They're getting less subtle as time goes on, as they're just molesting us and radiating us in the open. But it's sort of like it's basically happening to all of us at this point. We're sort of being disenfranchised because you're saying a woman who's an incest survivor and then she's being made to be patted down at the airport and sort of reliving her rape. And so Dad sort of just is trying to take her power away, trying to make her weak.
Yeah.
And, she probably had to work on recovering some of that, and then they want to, sort of, bring you down to a weakened state so that they can just, I don't know. It's
into fear mode.
Yeah.
Because when you're in fear, you make irrational decisions.
Definitely. I mean, that's how I did. I did believe the official story of 9/11 at first. I did, but because I was scared, I didn't think about it. I was like, oh no, I'm gonna die. And in Los Angeles, we thought we were next, and we weren't even in New York, so we were so scared that on the other side of the country, we're like, oh snap,
Yeah.
I never was for the war. I never, because I didn't see why we needed to go to war, but I was just scared that that we were just gonna get attacked.
Sarah, you were pretty young when that happened. We did our 9/11 show last week. How do you remember it? What do you remember?
Well, I was 9 at the time, and all I remember is being my mom pulling me out of school because we were near Shanksville, where the other quote unquote plane crashed.
Right.
And so I just remember that, and I remember hearing about these people dying, but I never saw the footage. So when I was probably about last year, right before school ended, I saw this article on 9/11 because I just never thought of it. And at first I was put off. I'm like, wait, that's just crazy. Like, how can that happen? But then I just took a second and was like, wait, who told me this information? The media who's, paid to tell lies. And, if they can push vaccines and murder and maim people through vaccines, then why couldn't they do that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's when you started to kind of
wake up to it. Yeah. And then I saw Loose Change, and I saw the people jumping out of the buildings, and you just see these explosions coming out of the windows.
Yeah.
And and then nanothermite, and then it should just be an open and shut case. There's nanothermite. It's a military weapon. Nobody else can get it other than the military, and it was found in the buildings.
Absolutely.
Wow. Loose change seems to be a big one for a lot of people, including myself.
Yeah.
Way to go, Loose Change. Like,
no doubt.
I hear a lot of people say that Loose Change was the one that really made them just start to question and kind of like snap out of their trance.
Yeah,
so,
it was really big. I think that I watched after I saw Loose Change, I started researching the filmmakers, and I started seeing their interviews with Popular Mechanics, or they actually weren't interviewed by Popular Mechanics. They were kind of in a debate. This was on Democracy Now!
Mm-hmm.
And so they were going up against the guys at Popular Mechanics who have maintained the official story the entire time. They claim that it's completely feasible and plausible, and they can explain it. But I mean, it's sort of, the physics can explain an elephant, hanging on off a cliff on a daisy. It's like that ridiculous. So physics can explain
that. Can't happen? I'm just kidding.
Right. But so they're saying that can happen. And so it was really heated. It was a good interview. But I mean, I think they came out and really were kind of gunning, and I didn't really know much about the conspiracy, that there were even people out there that were questioning the official story until years later, and then I found out that there was a whole movement of people kind of questioning it. But I always sort of questioned, the JFK assassination and all kinds of things, so it wasn't hard for me to sort of question it. But, I didn't sort of go, no, that can't be. I just was like, oh, that sounds plausible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're probably liars,
I think
because we know they're liars, so it's just a matter of putting it together and saying, oh, okay, well, they lied, so they lied somewhere. So how much did they lie? Did they completely stage it? Did they just allow it to happen? Like with Pearl Harbor, or things like that. So it's I don't know. So back to what we're going to be talking about on the show. I guess we're talking about Holocaust and genocide, and how just empowerment of the people, and this is just continuing to go on, and now it's going on a larger scale, but perhaps more subtle. But they've really managed to do this to the Native Americans and to the Canadian Aborigines for years and years and years, and it almost seems like they just got away with it, doesn't it? I don't really feel like
and the reason they've been able to get away with it is because there's been a document that the Vatican created to let this keep happening, which is it's Criminal Felicialis or something like that, and you can find it in Kevin Annett's book. And basically what it is it's to silence the victims and the perpetrators of rape and any other abuse that's within the Roman Catholic Church, and it's been in effect since 1962. And basically what it means is that raping a child is not a crime, it's just a sin, but talking about it within the church is a crime that can get you thrown out and even held in a papal prison.
Oh my God, that's just twisted. That's
deplorable. That's where you got to think that the Vatican is a bunch of weirdos. I mean, who are these people? Are they
demons in
Are they
robes?
demons? Are they reptilians or what are they? Because they're not. They don't act like.
If they're not human, they've lost their humanity.
Exactly.
How do you live with yourself? How do you fucking go and eat cake? You know what I mean? How do you do regular stuff without?
Well,
is it a form of manipulation or magic too? That the people that are abusing these, because I think also the state of America and the police state, and I think about we really need to reach out to the military and the police officer, because they're the ones that have the weapons. Right. They're the ones that are going to be killing. It's not going to be like Bill Gates. You know what I mean? It's not going to be like Warren Buffett, coming out and shooting people. But it's going to be basically they're using us against each other.
Yeah.
The other human beings to kill other human beings. So how are they doing it?
Yeah.
How are they manipulating us against each other? And I just thought, that documentary I was talking about, it was just so interesting how the guy was just like, I can't explain it. It was like something came over us and we couldn't really control it. He was saying that he knew what was going on, he knew what he was doing, but it was just like a dark cloud just like took over our hearts, that made us,
Yeah.
So there is something. I mean, it might, to our listeners who might think this sounds cockamamie or crazy, but killing each other the way that these people do, that's crazy.
Yeah.
How are they doing that? Maybe it is, I don't care, say I'm crazy, whatever. Maybe it is some kind of magic, manipulation, drugging. I think about also, you think about the soldiers that are going in and killing all these people in Iraq from the U.S., I think a lot of them
coming out with PTSD.
Yeah, post-traumatic stress syndrome or other types of diseases. A lot of them are getting vaccine injuries because they're being experimented on. Who knows how what effect that has on your psyche? There's also this other documentary about this drug called scopolamine, and you basically put it in somebody's drink, inject somebody with it, they sniff it, they're close to it, they smell it. It's such a powerful hallucinogen that it makes you lose your willpower. If I'm kill your kids, you just do it. You know what I mean? Without even thinking about it. It's the scariest shit I've ever.
Well,
Betty
doesn't compare. It's way,
I think they have technology that we don't even know about.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, you think of how many black ops the CIA has done, and we're not stuck in this, caveman age. These physicists haven't just, been stuck in the same place. There have had to been, other inventions or, things that people have created that we don't know about.
Yeah. Yeah, manipulation through sound waves, through drugs, something. Maybe it's something beyond our comprehension that are making people do this on a mass scale.
Right.
That we don't even know about. I think we need to really open our minds to that level, because it's just so heinous and it's been going on for so long.
And it doesn't make sense for.
It's senseless. I'm sorry. Go on, Sarah.
Oh, I was going to say it doesn't make sense for human beings to be killing each other, because we're meant to feel compassion for others, and we're, human beings like to help other people. So there has to be something that they're doing, manipulation, vaccines, chemtrails, and everything else that they're doing and then maybe other things that we don't know, because it doesn't make sense for human beings to be doing this. It's like they're keeping us in an animal nature.
Yeah, definitely.
Nature.
And yeah, exactly. So something that we're being dumbed down, you know. But then, you know, there's evidence to back this up. If you look at the chemicals in the food, the fluoride being put in our water, now they want to put lithium in our water. And then, you know, the effect that it has on the brain. So it doesn't make sense to do that. There's nothing that comes out of, you know, putting fluoride and things in the water.
Unless you have a hidden agenda.
Yeah, you know, and that's water is something that we need to survive. So, you know, people are not going to not drink water. You know, you can't boycott drinking water.
Right, and you got to think about these people who ran these residential schools, because how did the principal or the teachers or the people who were hired to work there see this going on? I mean, I would like to know if we can find, if any of the teachers or any of these people, did they ever speak out? I remember something in one of the documentaries, one of the victims said that the principal would bury bodies behind his office. I'm thinking, who is this guy? You know, who
does that?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what you're saying. You know, on a larger scale, you can say, well, it comes from the Vatican, it comes from the Pope, it comes from these people. But then, how about this principal? Like, what is, you know? So where did he get to this state where he was able to do that, and he was able to go home to his family and sleep at night, you know, or unless he slept at the school. I mean, I don't know what he did, but. And then they go in and they take these kids into dungeons and abuse them and rape them and put them on drugs, and then they go and they sleep. How do they do that? And so that's
they watch TV, like watch Dancing with the Stars, or whatever. Like, how do they? Yeah.
Exactly. You know, I just don't know how you suspend your humanity to go about your life when these things are going on. And so that's where it gets into what you're talking about, Virstyne, with these drugs and the fluorides and all this and that. You have to think that these people have been somehow put in this state, because it's just not normal.
Yeah, the vaccine too. You know, the vaccine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
well, yeah, exactly. So it's just, they've somehow been put into this state, and then they've probably been abused as well. And so then they come up thinking that this is normal, or that there's some kind of normalcy attached to that. So I don't know, but I think we're going to cut to a short break right now, and then when we get back, we'll be talking to Kevin Annett. We'll be asking him all these things that we were talking about right now, because I can't wait to hear what he has to say about it.
Definitely.
And yeah, it's going to be very exciting. So thank you, Sara, so much for coming in and giving us.
Yeah.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Yeah, we're always glad to have you on. So once again, you can find out more about Sara and her vaccine injury and her healing process at sarashealingjourney.wordpress.com, and we certainly welcome her back anytime. So thanks again, Sara. Love to have you.
Thank you.
And we are Truther Talk. You can find us at www.truthertees.com, our store at shop.truthertees.com. We're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we'll be talking to Kevin Annett.
Good.
Yes, hello. I wanted to say that I love the conspiracy realist t-shirts that you can get only online at ship.truthertees.com. I knew a conspiracy when I saw it. America is run by the CIA. Yes, the CIA. That's why you have to wear a conspiracy realist t-shirt all the time to let people know that you are not stupid. Go to ship.truthertees.com. Ship.truthertees.com. Ship, like to go shopping when you buy things at the grocery store. truthertees.com.
Hi, welcome back. You're listening to Truther Talk. You can find us at www.truthertees.com and our store at shop.truthertees.com. On today's show, we are talking to Kevin Annett. He is a former minister and one of the founders of the ITCCS, or the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State, which can be located on the web at itccs.org. Kevin is an author. He wrote the first and second editions of Hidden from History, The Canadian Holocaust, which is available on Amazon. Kevin also co-produced, wrote, and appears in the film Unrepentant, which documents Canada's secretly planned genocide of the Aboriginal people in church-run Indian residential schools. Please welcome to the show, Kevin Annett. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Great. Thank you for being on our show. We really are big fans of your work. We've been following your work for a while and are excited to have you here. So at the intro, I mentioned the book that you wrote, The Hidden from History, The Canadian Holocaust. So for our viewers who aren't familiar with it, who haven't been following your work maybe, or just learning about it for the first time, can you explain what the Canadian Holocaust is and why it has been hidden from history?
Well, in a nutshell, it was a plan by the churches and government of Canada to wipe out a lot of the native nations, mostly in Western Canada, starting around the 1880s. There was a plan in place to set up what were called Indian boarding schools, and in those schools, something like over half the children incarcerated were deliberately killed off with smallpox and tuberculosis. That's been proven in documents and letters now from government and church officials. The plan basically was to get the natives off the land quickly by wiping out the native families. And, unfortunately it succeeded. These schools carried on until the 1990s, and we figured tens of thousands of children died in them. There's been an enormous cover-up about it, but gradually we've been getting the truth out. And a lot of this evidence is up online, hiddennolonger.com, where you can also see our film Unrepentant, which documents a lot about this stuff.
Yeah, I watched the documentary, and so how important do you think it is to control the history when teaching this in school? Because obviously this is something that we're in the United States, and we had similar things happen here, and we didn't learn about this in school, and I'm sure they don't teach this in the public school system in Canada either. So do you think that's an important thing for them to kind of hide that?
Well, very much, not only because, no government or institutions that do these crimes ever want to talk about them or acknowledge them, because a lot of the people who did these crimes are still alive. I mean, the last school didn't close till the 1990s. There are perpetrators still walking around, and also because in many ways these things carry on. I mean, within the Native community, you see a lot of the people who I work with in Vancouver, in Canada, these people are still suffering the effects in a big way of this traumatization. And the churches and governments have always been worried about being sued, about the real truth coming out, so they've done their utmost to contain the whole issue. And, unfortunately for them, it hasn't worked. More and more people are coming forward with this evidence all the time.
Well, so, I'm just curious. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you started learning about this and some of the things, the changes, that subsequently took place in your life when you began exposing the truth about this genocide in Canada?
Well, it really started about 20 years ago for me. I arrived on the West Coast as a United Church minister, and I began to learn these things, and as Native people told me these stories, I tried to share them in the church, but most of the white people just turned a blind eye and ear. I was told by the church officials not to believe the stories. They basically claimed they were being made up and that, but as the years went on and I learned more, I couldn't stay quiet about it. So when I began to open up these stories, I'd let people in and to speak from my pulpit. I eventually was fired and forced out of the church, and went through a really bad time personally. My family broke up over it, and I lost access to my kids. I mean, it was a long, kind of brutal process. But the more that happened, the more people were coming to me with these stories. So over the years, I've just allowed the people to speak and created platforms where they can get the story out, and it's really turned the country around in some ways. We were finally forced the government to apologize over this in July of 2008, but the real stories are just beginning to come out. So I think it shows that if you're persistent with something over the years, it does get results, but it does often take a lot of personal sacrifice.
It's interesting because as a child, I was always taught that Holocaust is something that happens to Jewish people, like in Germany, and slavery is something that happens like to black people. But as I've grown older, I've realized there's like this vicious cycle of Holocaust incidents and slavery that has taken place all over the planet. So, I mean, why do you still think that this happens today, even as we speak, right? I mean, and do you think that there's a bigger agenda going on? You know?
Well, yeah, I can give you some examples of why Tirzan. Native people in Canada, like in the U.S., still occupy land that's quite valuable. In the United States, there's, as in Canada, there's a lot of uranium under native land in the Black Hills of South Dakota, in northern Saskatchewan, and actually the same company, Camco, is mining uranium in both areas, and it's causing a lot of destruction. There's a very high cancer rate among native people today in the Central Plains because of this uranium mining. There's areas in southern South Dakota that are just uninhabitable now because of this, and it helps these companies and the governments that are connected to them to get native people off the land. It doesn't help them to have these stories of genocide come out. So yeah, there's still kind of a vested economic interest in this genocide. Yeah, go ahead.
In addition to there being an economic interest, do you think that there's also another interest in addition to?
Yeah, I think that it's not politically very wise for often white politicians feel that there's nothing to be gained for them to take this on. There's still a lot of racism in Canada and America towards Indians, but also old habits die hard, and a lot of the Christian churches still pretty much believe that they had the right to come here and impose their religion on other people. There's still a devaluing of non-Christian religions. I think all of that is true as well.
Wow. It's very interesting, huh? Yeah. So, I mean, after the death rate of the Aboriginal people in the Canadian residential schools, maybe it was about 50%. Could you tell us about these people? Mostly they seem to be mostly children, and they were deliberately exposed to things such as like contamination and disease, such as smallpox and things like that, deliberately. So, could you tell us how you found out about this?
Well, at first just from the people telling me these stories, but after I was fired from the church, I began to work on a doctoral degree at the University of British Columbia. And I began to find documents which are all up online. You can read them at hiddennolonger.com. That's my book and research. It's all up online. And these documents showed that it was a regular practice to put healthy children with the sick and then not treat them. And this was described by a guy called Dr. Peter Bryce, who worked for the Indian Affairs Department as a medical officer. He studied the residential schools. He wrote a report about it in 1909, which said that these children were being deliberately exposed to disease, and then the whole practice was being covered up by the churches. He was fired from the civil service for doing that, and the report was buried. But these things gradually appear again when you start digging, and these 50 years later the death rate was still as high. So that tells you that this wasn't just from random abuse by priests. This was a policy to do this over the years.
And do you think that it has a particular because it seems to be more so among the Indian population than the white population, and do you know of any in the white population where this genocide has happened or they've been used for these types of experiments? And is there any particular reason why I mean, you mentioned that there's racism, but other than that, is there any particular reason why it's mostly targeted on these people?
Yeah. Brown,
dark-skinned people. Yeah, seems to be more
targeted.
Yeah, here in North America, of course, we know why. I mean, to get them off their land, and the whole, there's a 500-year history of genocide here, but these crimes happen all over the planet. It isn't just against natives. It's one of the reasons I'm working now with this tribunal and court process to try to get people united across borders, because the stories I hear in Ireland and down in America as well, and other countries, from all sorts of groups who went through this kind of thing, like they were using children in Catholic orphanages for drug testing, involuntary drug testing. They were sterilizing young women, locking them up for their entire lives at these Magdalen laundries in Ireland. The same kinds of crimes were going on in the white world as well. So, I think anybody is susceptible to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in some cases, children being sort of kidnapped. I mean, we're seeing that. We see that here in the United States, and it happens a lot in Canada. That even white children being just taken from their home by what we call here Child Protective Services.
Ironically, right?
Right.
Yes, yeah.
CPS will come in and just take these kids, and then they're using them in foster care for pharmaceutical experimentation.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time.
There's a big child trafficking network through the orphanages, through the child protection services, and that's been documented. So, yeah, this child trafficking is a big underground industry, and unfortunately, when it happens in the government services, it's hard to take on because it seems to have a lot of legal protection behind it.
Right. We had the incident in the United States back in, I want to say it was the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, with the children at the Boys Town orphanage they had uncovered the Franklin cover-up that they had been trafficking them for sex trade, and it's, I don't know, because it just seems sort of suspicious to me. We recently had this whole Penn State incident, so it seems like it's very prevalent, this like sexual abuse, and and then those children are obviously expendable, so they can be used for experimentation or anything like that. So so in your research discovering what they've been doing in these Canadian residential schools, do you find that this sort of thing is carrying on, these sort of like sex trade, sex trafficking kind of thing, as well as this sort of murder?
Well, very much this stuff carries on. One of the areas that I'm working with is on the west coast of Canada. A lot of Native women have disappeared, a lot of white women as well. And these crimes are unfortunately not regularly looked into by the police because it extends so widely throughout society that the honest police I've spoken to have said that they're under a lot of pressure all the time not to investigate child disappearances because they know that it sometimes implicates powerful people, politicians and others who are involved in this child trafficking. So it's kind of hard to work in that kind of climate. That's why we're trying to get support outside Canada. I've had to go abroad because of a lot of harassment I've received whenever I try to look into this stuff.
Not only they're sold into child trafficking, but also I saw in the documentary that they're used for like pharmaceutical experimentation. So could you tell us what you've discovered about this type of experimentation that they were used in, the children?
Yes, there's a bunch of that stuff we've documented. For one thing, some of the big pharmaceutical companies have agreements with the churches to try out experimental drugs. Now we know that.
Wait. They have agreements with the churches?
Yeah, one of the ways it works is in the United States, Eli Lilly and Roche Pharmaceuticals are big contributors to it's called the Fund for Theological Education. It funds the seminaries where priests and ministers are trained. In return, we found documents as far back as the 1930s showing that the churches were using children in Catholic orphanages, in Indian residential schools and hospitals to try out experimental drugs. They were trying out experimental birth control devices like the IUD on Native women in hospitals. People would die as a result of this. They've begun to document the same programs in Ireland, where a lot of people died from drug testing in Catholic orphanages. So, yeah, this is a much bigger whole area we're going to look into in the spring when we have the evidence posted up online.
I'm just curious because there's a link now between the pharmaceutical experimentation and the church, pharmaceutical industry, the church, and genocide. And I'm just thinking about Bill Gates, and I was just curious, as far as Bill Gates is concerned, what do you think about his stance that he's taken on vaccines? And he seems to be, pretty much all too happy going into third world countries to promote them.
Well, I think he's part of the ongoing genocide, frankly. It's one thing, to give an example of that, it's already been shown through independent analyses in Nigeria and the Philippines that for the last 15 years or more, UNESCO and the World Health Organization has been administering polio vaccines that are laced with sterilizing agents. There's a substance, Heptavax, which is a known sterilizing agent, which was also being introduced among Inuit people in Alaska and the Northwest Territories. This seems to be a regular habit of depopulation. And, there was Robert McNamara, before he died, was part of what was called the World Immunization Program, where he openly said in interviews in the 1990s that their plan was to depopulate whole areas of the world using vaccines. So I think that people are very open about their agenda, and it's out and out genocide.
Wow. Since these crimes are being carried both by the state and church, and they just seem just heinous, callous. I mean, I can't really think of words to describe all the things that I saw you talk about in the documentary and some of the testimonies that the Native people had to say about the things that were done to them. But do you believe that, since it's done by the church, do you believe that this type of child abuse and just outright murder is some kind of form of maybe ritualistic sacrifice?
I think there's that element to it, definitely. Early on, when I began to interview survivors of the schools, and I've interviewed many, many hundreds of them, they would describe similar things happening to them, marks left on their body, being used ritualistically in ceremonies, things that suggest that, yes, definitely satanic, other forms of ritual, torture, and killing did go on in these schools, so-called schools. And we've even had, people who are more well-versed in that area, including police who have investigated this, who say definitely there was that element, but because it involved the churches, they backed off. And that's unfortunately, they were able to operate behind the cover of these churches as a way to avoid, investigation.
It makes me so angry. It just makes me...
Yeah. I saw in one of your interviews, I think you were talking to Alex Jones, and you were sort of touching on this a little bit, and you talked about the testimonial of one of the victims and connection to the Church of England. So can you just tell us what you heard about this and how the Queen, I think you said the Queen and even Prince Charles were involved in some of these kidnapping of these children, potentially?
Well, Prince Philip, yeah.
Philip, okay.
This was from a testimony of William Coombs, who is now dead. He died suddenly in the hospital after going public with the story. But William was, as a young boy, I knew William quite well. He worked with our network in Vancouver and he was a regular on my radio show while I still had it. And William said in October 1964, he was a young boy at the Kamloops Catholic Residential School. And he said the Queen and Prince Philip showed up for a visit right out of the blue. Now, I checked the records, and they were in Canada at that time. There was a royal visit in Canada for 10 days in that month. And William claims that the Queen and Prince Philip took all the kids down to the river for a picnic, and that they took 10 children, 7 boys and 3 girls, with them, and none of those children were ever seen again. And they said that that was strange since they're all from there, but they never showed up again. They just vanished. And we wrote to Buckingham Palace. They never answered our letters. William went public with that story, and the next month he was forced to report to the Catholic Hospital in Vancouver, St. Paul's Hospital. His partner, May, said that they gave him some injections. He went into a coma quickly, and then they pulled him off life support after less than 2 days, which is very unusual. That's never done. So, I do believe that he was silenced that way because they were concerned about that story coming out.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's...
this is creepy.
Yes, indeed. Wow. So going back, as we mentioned in the intro, you were one of the founders of the ITC, National Tribunal of Crimes of Church and the State. And so describe to us how you formed this tribunal and what does it do?
Well, it was really formed by groups in 5 countries originally. These were survivors of primarily Catholic Church abuse in Ireland, Canada, the U.S., England, and Australia originally. The idea was because we're dealing with an international corporation, the Catholic Church, we need to be united across borders too. So initially it was to bring survivors together to, try to get legal action and political action to bring the church to task for what they've done. now what it's evolved into is an organization around the world that's setting up a common law court. And we're actually, this last week, we started a court process where we're going to file the evidence in various courts around the world and put it up online so people can see that we're really dealing with crimes against humanity and criminal conspiracy by these churches, and especially by the Vatican. So we're, coordinating protests, we're holding media conferences, and this common law court right now in Europe, and trying to get people in America and Canada to get on board too. We've had people really all over the world come forward with more and more evidence. So it's kind of a slow process, but gradually we're confronting the church more and more, united across borders about this. And so we're really quite encouraged by how people have come forward.
Yeah, and you have been doing a lot of good work in this area. And recently, this is very disturbing, but you found the human remains of some of the Aborigines that were held in these residential schools. You sort of dug them up or uncovered them. And so tell us about what you found, and do we know the identity of who these people were?
Yeah, well, that was at the Mohawk Indian Residential School in Brantford, Ontario. It's in southern Ontario, about an hour's drive from the Niagara Falls, the U.S. border there. And it was the oldest residential school in Canada, set up by the Church of England. I was invited there a year and a half ago by the Mohawk elders to do surveys on the grounds of the school. So we got ground-penetrating radar. We found that underneath the surface there was a lot of disturbed soil. And with the help of eyewitnesses, we started digging there, accompanied by elders. So it wasn't just us going in to dig. We had elders there guiding the process and doing ceremonies and that kind of thing. Within an hour, we found remains, bones, and clothing from school uniforms. Now, to give you an example of this, eyewitnesses have said whenever children died at the school, they planted trees on top of the buried remains, so that they couldn't be found and dug up. Well, sure enough, we pulled back the roots of this tree, and in among the roots were bits of clothing and buttons that were identified to come from school uniforms. These were old ivory and wooden buttons from before the 1950s. We also found bones. Most of these were animal bones, but archaeologists confirmed that there were fragments of children's bones mixed among those animal bones. So this should have been declared a crime site, but the whole story was blacked out of the Canadian media. The police have never intervened, and a lot of pressure was brought to bear on the elders to drop the investigation. So there was a lot of harassment of people who came forward, and this whole thing was, for now, shut down. And that's why we want to go back there with a archaeological team to do more of the digging and basically bring these children home for a proper burial, which is what we've been trying to do all along.
Wow. I'm sorry. It's just so heart-wrenching, and just you lose focus for a minute. It's just wow.
Yeah. It's cool stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
And you filed a legal action for crimes against humanity, and you, which I believe is, you said, is coming out on the 15th, September 15th. So tell us about that, and tell us what this legal action is for, who it's against.
Yeah, the name, we're actually issuing a summons tomorrow, and I'll send you folks a copy of it. You can, first of all, read it all. There's a YouTube posting about it and a statement on itccs.org, the tribunal website. But in summary, what it does is it names the top officers of the Catholic and Protestant churches, the Pope, and government officials in these different countries as being part of a criminal conspiracy. It says that they've got 10 days to respond and to be part of this court process. And if not, we're going to go ahead and start posting the charges and the evidence against them. We would eventually want to get arrest warrants from different courts in different nations. Mm-hmm. And proceed with this in the International Criminal Court and other venues so that, we can bring charges and see these people face trial.
Wow, that's huge.
I know. I would love to see that happen.
Me too.
Awesome.
I will definitely be rooting you guys on and praying for success.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
We can do whatever we can. What can we do to help this?
Well, First of all, get everybody you know to read our websites, itccs.org and hiddennolonger.com. I'm going to be coming through the States in the fall and the spring, and if you folks can organize some speaking venues, we can start rallying the community. There's already people in different states who are acting as citizen jurors in our common law court. If people would like to work on any of that, just write to me, hiddenfromhistory1@gmail.com, and I'll certainly come to your communities and we can work together on this. Also, going out to Catholic churches, handing out leaflets, all of that's up online, and itccs.org. You can read more about all that.
Okay.
Was there ever a time where you felt that, being a minister, being, a man of God, and finding all these things about the church, did you ever find that to be like an inner conflict, just to know this stuff?
Well, it was very disturbing. I never really believed, even when I was in the church as a minister, I never really believed in organized religion in a big way. I mean, I knew the history of the church and Christianity and how it had done a lot of these crimes, but it was just hard to see church people up close look at this stuff and then tell me to be quiet about it. To know that this had happened, it was still going on, and yet I always did shut up about it so I could keep my paycheck. I mean, to see that level of immorality in the church was a real eye-opener, and I realized these were really wolves in sheep's clothing, and it's one of the things that woke me up,
Wow. I know you mentioned in your documentary that the survivors of the residential homes, and even yourself, after all of the atrocities that you faced, that they won't heal, that they will never get over an experience, but they can tell the truth. So, I mean, do you find telling the truth to be a form of healing?
Well, it is. I find in healing circles all the time, it's only when people are free to really name the names and not worry about forgiveness and all of that stuff, but just say, this person did this to me and they've got to be held accountable. Those are often the healthiest people, the ones who are able to recover their voice. It's also getting out in the public, and I find Native people often are more empowered by being involved in protest, in being able to confront the church. That's very healing for them as well. So I think it takes a lot of forms, but it's mostly realizing that you're being listened to and that you're not being accused of making it up, and that's very important for people,
Well, but what effect have you seen that this type of abuse has on somebody's soul, not only the victim but the perpetrator as well?
Well, it's, perpetrators live in a real world of lies and illusions. I mean, just today and at Amsterdam Church, I was talking to one of the priests, and I could tell in his eyes that he knew the church was covering up a lot of stuff, but he felt he couldn't say anything. Well, that's really crippling for somebody in that position, and it's time for everybody to realize that all of us need to recover from this, and we don't have to cover for these institutions anymore. We don't have to tell the lies anymore. So that's, I often say that to clergy. You can come forward and tell the secrets, and it'll be, the truth really is going to set them free.
Wow. Well, I mean, you seem like, from what I saw in the documentaries and the interviews that I've been watching, or we've been watching, it seems like you've nearly had your life destroyed on just so many levels. And I'm just wondering, was there ever a time that you wished that you didn't hear any of these stories, and that your life can just go back to the way that it was?
Yeah, sometimes. When the pain got really bad, losing custody of my kids and not seeing them for a while was really hard. Although my daughters are in their 20s now, and we're still really close, and this has in a way brought us together even more. But I realized, despite the momentary doubt and pain like we all have, I couldn't stop this because of all the children who might suffer tomorrow from it, and I wouldn't let these people break me. I was, I guess, too angry at what they were doing to let them do that. I didn't want to let them get away with this stuff. So yeah. I think that that's something that we have to keep in mind. Think of the people who are going to suffer if we don't do this.
Yeah, and your children and the children that you want to have.
That's right. Yeah.
Definitely. Even as a teacher, I don't have children. I want to someday, but when I see all these atrocities that are committed against children, I look at the students, my friends' children, students that I teach, imagining that happening to them, and it's just, Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, someday you might be in a position where you know there's a wrong and you're told to be quiet about it, and it takes courage to speak out and to go against the stream, but it's the only way that society moves forward, and so sometimes some of us have to go through that pain for the sake of so many others,
Wow. What do you say to people who see evil going on around them, and then they get depressed because they feel like they can't do anything about it, like they know that it's wrong, but they feel powerless, or they feel like, because honestly that's how all of these things seem to happen. There are people that are watching and letting it happen.
Well, I had an experience of that once. I was back when I was younger, I went down to work in a refugee camp in Guatemala, and there was a priest there. He'd been thrown out of the church like I was, and I said, well, what keeps you going? Because there were death threats against him. It's really dangerous down there, from the army and death squads. He said, whenever I feel really afraid, I go and look at the poorest child in the camp, and I realize that I could get away, but she can't escape. She's stuck there for her whole life, and she gave me the courage to carry on another day. And I'd say that to people: just go to somebody who is going to suffer if you don't stand up for them, and they will give you the encouragement. Together, we have to find the courage to carry on, and don't let yourself be isolated. Find other people who are willing to speak out too, and I find that if you're stubborn and keep at it, doors start opening. I mean, I'm an example. I was just this minister, but I've stayed at it 20 years, and look at the result it's had. I think that can be an inspiration to other people.
Wow, definitely. Definitely to us, because
good. Well, then just carry it on in your own life, and things will be good. I mean, sometimes if we look at too big a picture of the world, we can get too demoralized. Let's not lose sight of each other. In this age, we can get information overload too often.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah, definitely. Wow.
Yeah.
That's really good advice.
Yeah. That is excellent advice. And so, what's happening now? What are you aware of now? Are there any more of these residential schools still in existence?
Well, not in Canada, but all over the world there are. I'm working with a group. One of the guys in our tribunal is Matthew McDaniel. He's based in Salem, Oregon, and he's married to an Aka woman. The Aka are the native people of Thailand, and there's Catholic residential schools operating as we speak in northern Thailand, where they bring in Aka children. They're worked in sweatshops. They're brainwashed with Catholicism, just like what they did in the residential schools here. They're doing in Thailand right now. And some of the fundamentalist Baptist churches are over there as well. So we're confronting the Catholic Church over the Indian schools. The Indian residential schools are operating in Thailand. But even in Canada and the United States, even though there aren't schools, the effects carry on today. A lot of Native kids are still taken out of their homes and put in white foster homes where they lose their language. I mean, in a way, it's almost been privatized in these foster care system, but the residential school system. But a lot of these things carry on, so we have to not ever think that it's somehow in the past.
Yeah, we have our friend who we have on the show frequently, Liam Sheff. He's a journalist, and he did an article a few years ago about in New York they had an orphanage where they were using most of the kids were Dominican, and they were using them as for drug experimentation. They were testing AIDS drugs, which were basically just relabeled black box cancer drugs, and many of the children died and got sick, and they were pumping in their stomachs in it. So this is something that we know is happening even today, and I, even someone who I am friends with on Facebook has his daughter who is autistic. He's Canadian, and he has an autistic daughter who was taken away from him and then subsequently put on medications immediately. I don't know if they're using her experimentally, but I do know that there's a financial incentive to take someone with special needs into the system, and also an even greater financial incentive to put them on drugs.
Well, the first thing to do is document everything, and let the people who are doing this know that they're being watched, and this is being put out in the public eye. So that's the best protection. But yeah, it's really important to not get overwhelmed by this, but find one person or one issue that you can really work on, because that way you feel you've done something. And we need to sustain ourselves over the long run in this and not kind of burn ourselves out. So
not spread ourselves too thin, right? Yeah.
It's true, yeah.
It's like I can see how that can take place, because there's just so much going on in the world that you want to do, things about, not only with like humans, but like the environment and animals, and and I mean everything. There's just so much. So yeah, that's really good advice to pick one thing that you're mostly something you're passionate about. It seems,
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, you have a personal connection to, or you're passionate about,
right?
And focus on that. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Wow, this has been really great, Kevin. I think we're just about out of time here, but we want to thank you once again for being on our show. And for more information about these crimes that we're talking about, these crimes against humanity that Kevin talked about in his work, you can go to hiddenfromhistory.org, and to hear more about the legal action is itccs.org. You can also find his online book, Hidden No Longer, at hiddennolonger.com. Is all that correct, Kevin? Do you have anything more you want to add?
Well, that's right. And also, if you go to Amazon.com, I have a book I wrote called Unrepentant Disrobing the Emperor. You can order it on Amazon.com. And I'm working on a new documentary. Like I said, I'm going to be through the States, so if you guys want to stay in touch, I'd be happy to come to your area and speak and stay in touch with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. We really appreciate that, and we want to get this out as much as possible.
Good.
And, so thanks again.
Thank you.
It was an honor to have you on. We're so...
Thank you both.
Yeah.
And good luck in your own work, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Kevin.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
North of Hudson's Bay, James Bay, and at the southern tip of James Bay, the settlement of Moose Factory. News Magazine salutes Education Week with films of an Indian residential school 500 miles north of Toronto. Principal Eric Barrington dispenses first aid among his many other duties. He heads one of Canada's 69 Indian residential schools, scattered in key locations as far north as the Arctic Circle. They've a total of 11,000 pupils, orphans, convalescents, those who live too far in the wilderness to get to a daily school. They learn not only games and traditions, such as the celebration of St. Valentine's Day, but the mastery of words, which will open to them the whole range of the ordinary Canadian curriculum. For children who live with the midnight sun in their summer holidays, an explanation. They come to school in September, go home for holidays in June. Instead of the isolation and neglect of the past, a free and equal chance with children in urban centers. A service begins each day. The school is conducted by the Church of England, though it's maintained, like other Indian schools, by the Federal Department of Indian Affairs. For the oldest Canadians, a new future.
All right, welcome back. You're listening to Truth or Talk. You can find us at www.truthertees.com or store at shop.truthertees.com. And we were, hey, Virstyne, we were just interviewing Kevin Annett. I'm still kind of reeling from it, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I just, I'm always, I keep saying this, but each time I say it, I mean it, because I'm just always, like, amazed at how much my hate grows for these people that, it's the same people. It comes down, it always, like, comes back to the same people that are involved in this stuff. It's so, it's so, I mean, I can't even articulate. I'm at such a loss for words, because, you know, this stuff is just so heinous and so creepy and just, anyway.
Yeah. I felt that he kind of had me at a loss for words a few times, which is, it was because he would say these things that they were doing, and he articulated his points very clearly. He obviously knew what he was talking about, and it just, but I would just sit there and go, wow, they found just bones of these children underneath a school, and I mean, I already knew that, you know, when I asked him about it, but and that's why I asked him about it, because I'd already heard about it, and then of course Sara mentioned it during the intro. But it's still, I still have a hard time, having that sort of, my head sort of wrap around that fact, that these things are happening, that they're just killing babies, that 50% of these children died in these residential homes. How can they? I mean, that's just crazy.
And it's going on here too.
Yeah,
it's not. This is the Canadian incident, specific incident. He stumbled on it, on being Canadian. But we go into that a little bit in the interview too, about like how our friend Liam, found that they were experimenting on Dominican children in the U.S. modern day.
Yeah.
And like
Right. That was just what, like, I don't think that was 10 years ago. That was 5 years ago or something.
So, and I'm sure it's still going on. I mean, stuff like that doesn't just like go away one day. It doesn't just stop. So.
No, there's a special place in hell for those people.
Right.
Who let those things go on? They, the devil is like, he's making sure that these people are going to have to suffer for the rest of their lives, for the rest of their soul's existence, if they have a soul.
Yeah, this is just,
it's just horrible. And Kevin, I mean, I'm kind of, once in a while you get someone on the show, or you learn about someone who you're just kind of amazed by their will and their ability to just persevere
and still be in good spirits after everything that's happened to them,
Right.
So.
I had such a pleasant feeling about him when I talked to him, and I felt that he was one of these people, one of these rarities of somebody who's just truly taking God's word
and living by it.
Living by God's word. I mean, he was a minister, and he mentioned, I found that interesting. He said he always kind of questioned organized religion, even as a minister. So, thinking about it now, I mean, I should have asked him, well, why'd you become a minister then?
Yeah.
Because that was kind of a weird thing to... Go ahead.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing. Because in every religion there's, I guess I would say spirituality. Every religion has some type of belief in a higher power and a higher purpose. And I can see he probably hung on to that as opposed to hanging on the set of dogma that comes with each religion, or hiding behind the mask of religion to make himself feel better about himself, because there are a lot of people that hide behind religion. I bet you a lot of these people that were doing this to the children have the nerve to go to church on Sunday,
Sure.
They would bury kids in the back and then go to church, that's just a lot of, huh?
I was trying to cut you off. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's a lot of the mentality of these people. A lot of people, even, people aren't even, I wouldn't say even today, but, my experience with organized religion, maybe people aren't doing crimes as heinous as that, but they're still really self-serving in their reasons as to why they go to church. I myself really, or why they go to church, or why they follow religion. In my personal experience, I know very few people who are that religious and who really do follow the word of God, who really do take it for what I think was really supposed to mean, which is basically do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and love one another.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of, you were talking about how people will go to church for their own selfish reasons, and they can commit these atrocities and then go to, if you're in a Catholic
confession,
you go to confession and you're absolved, right? That's it. You're done. It's all God, washed away. God forgives you.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of lets people off the hook, and then they can just go back to destroying these lives and raping children and doing whatever they want for their own selfish desires, and then come back and say, oh, well, God forgives me because I went to church and I asked for absolution. But I would never worship a God who allowed people to get away with that. I wouldn't.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Because God exists. I think that it's really, when it comes down to it, it's in you. It's your own God.
Definitely, yeah.
And he certainly lives by his own God and by the word of God, and just kind of puts along. He's going on with this for 20 years, and it's, I think, a very lacking in rewards, other than just that he's doing good.
Yeah.
But he's not.
And he's so brave. He's so because he's not naive. He knows what he's going up against, but he just knows that it's something that he has to do. And we were talking earlier. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but you were talking about we were going over the questions because each show we have a list of questions that we ask the guests, and then we kind of improv as we go along. But one of my questions that I initially wrote was do you trust the justice system? But if you don't trust the justice system, then why are you choosing to pursue these people within the justice system? And then you were like, no, he started his own court to pursue them. And I was like, you can do that?
I know.
So I was like, that's possible. We should get some more of these things going. Can we get one on chemtrail for chemtrails, and can we get one for vaccines and other things going on? Because I need to research that. I had no idea that. A whole new world of possibility just opened up to me.
Well, one of the things that Sarah was saying in the intro is that this tribunal, because it's an international tribunal of crimes of church and state against crimes against humanity. So you could actually open up to vaccines. You could actually open up to other pharmaceutical experimentations and these types of things that we know about that are going on, chemtrails maybe. So his work is so important because of that.
Yeah.
It's not, we don't have to maybe reinvent the wheel because he's already done it. He's already created this tribunal, and so it's really very interesting. It's really a representation of the people, and he's saying no, the justice system isn't going to help us out. And I'm sure in the beginning of his work he probably tried to do that, because he mentioned how the cops don't care. They're not going to arrest these people. They know about it, and even the ones that have a conscience and actually care about what's going on still are quiet, because you're dealing with that many people that are high up, and they know that it's going to be their lives and it's going to be their. So he's very brave. I don't know. He kind of left me for lots of words a couple times, because and that doesn't usually happen. I can usually think of more questions and things like that. But after he would say these things, and I just kind of go wow, and I was just so impressed with just what he's doing and the great work that he's doing. So I really, really, really want to encourage anybody listening to this, please check out what he's doing and try to get this out there, because these are the lives of children, and as we talked about, he kind of told us that, try not to spread yourself too thin, and he's managed to sort of focus on this one thing that's happening, and it's not just one small thing, it's a big thing that's happening to these children in Canada.
And eventually it's going to affect you. It's not nobody's going to get away with it. That's the thing, too. I think that people, they see this stuff and they're like, oh, that's really sad, but they don't feel like they can do anything because it's something that's already happened. But I think one of the main reasons for talking about these things not only allows people that were victimized to heal, but it also lets people see patterns so that we can stop this from ever happening again, because genocide and slavery and things like this have been going on for years and years and years. It's the same pattern, different parts all over the world. And I think it doesn't happen overnight. It happens subtly. And I think in all the cases, people never believed that it would happen to them. People didn't see the signs. The signs were all around, but people weren't aware of the signs.
What was the quote? The Nazi quote that you told me that he said, when they went after so and so, I did nothing. And then
I don't know the whole quote, but it's they came for the Catholics, they came for the Muslims or something. They keep naming all of these ethnic groups, and then by the time they got to this one person, there was nobody left to help him because he didn't say anything. There was nobody around. So it's when they came to me, there was nobody left to speak for me.
Right, exactly.
So that's what this is all about.
And that's the message I would say to anybody. If you feel that you've been personally affected by this sort of, I don't know what they call it, the eugenics. I suppose if you have a vaccine-damaged child or you've been damaged by pharmaceuticals, but then you choose not to look at what's going on here in Canada, or you choose not to look at what's going on in the Iraq war, and then you're complacent about these things, because it's all of us, it's all of our children, it's It's happening to all of us. None of us are immune. And you think you are, but you're not. If you think you are, you're not.
Okay, all right, I found the code actually. I'll read it to close this out.
Okay.
If that's cool. It's Martin Nimolia. I don't know. Please forgive me if I'm saying his name wrong. But it's Friedrich Gustav Emil Martin Nimolia. He was a Protestant pastor and social activist, and he said, when the Nazis came for the communists, I remained silent. I was not a communist. When they locked up the Social Democrats, I remained silent. I was not a Social Democrat. When they came for the trade unionists, I did not speak out. I was not a trade unionist. When they came for the Jews, I remained silent. I wasn't a Jew. When they came for me, there was no one left to speak out.
Right.
So, I mean,
yeah.
You know.
So they're coming after these Aboriginal children. Speak out for them. Speak out for all of our kids. And so we'll leave it with that, and hopefully you guys check out this information. Kevin Annett's work is at hiddennolonger.com. That's where you can find his online book about this, and also itccs.org. That's the International Tribunal Against Crimes of Church and State.
Yeah.
And so we hope that you guys look into it, because this is really, we thank again Kevin Annett and Sara Sotomayor for doing our show today. We are Truther Talk. You can find us at www.truthertees.com, our store at shops.truthertees.com. We have Conspiracy Realist t-shirt available for purchase. You buy 3 shirts, you get a free copy of the official stories by Militia. So, once again, thank you, and with peace, truth, and love.
Peace, truth, and love.
Climbing up on Salisbury Hill, I could see the city lights. Wind was blowing, time stood still. Eagle flew out of the night. It was something to observe. Came in close, I heard a voice, standing, stretching every nerve. Had to listen, had no choice. I did not believe the information. Just had to trust imagination. My heart going boom, boom, boom. Son, he said, grab your things, I've come to take you home. To keep inside.